This is the Terra Nova Laser Compact 2, and this is my review of this tent. So this is my Terra Nova Laser Compact 2 tent, now erected. I've owned this tent for a couple of years. I've spent 81 nights in it, and there are not many reviews online about this tent, so I've decided to do a review so that you can make a decision as to whether you think this is the backpacking tent for you or not. I've owned many tents over the years, but this tent is by far the best quality tent that I've ever owned. I'm going to talk you through what I really like about this tent, but I'll also show you areas where I think it can be improved. Terra Nova is a UK based company, and they've won many awards over the years for their innovative designs with regards to their tents. This tent in 2019 won the UK Outdoor Industry Award for Best Tent. When this tent was first produced, it was called the Laser Competition, and it became known as the Laser Compact tent due to the length of the DAC poles that are used for the central pole. As a result of them being shorter, the name was changed to Compact, and it can now fit into a rucksack very easily in a sideways position. The Laser Compact series by Terra Nova has not seen many changes due to the fact that this tent is successfully designed. But one change took place a couple of years ago, and which then caused me to want to buy the tent. This central pole used to have a waterproof sleeve on top of it to stop water getting into the tent. But Terra Nova have now made this sleeve completely waterproof, so there's no need to have a fiddly external cover on this central pole, and that for me was a game changer. Before I get into the reasons why I like this tent, let's just go through some of the specifics. The fly sheet here is made of 20D ripstop sil nylon. The inner is also made of 20D ripstop nylon, and the ground sheet has a heavier 30D ripstop nylon. The poles that are used on the centre and at either end are 8.7mm DAC poles, so good quality. When this tent is packed away, the length of the pack is 30 centimetres with a diameter of 14 centimetres, so a really good size. The weight of this tent comes in at just slightly under 1.3 kilograms, so not the lightest tent out there on the market. The external height of this tent is 100 centimetres, with the maximum internal height being 95. The internal length, most important thing to me, is 230 centimetres long, with the width at its widest point 105 centimetres and at its narrowest point 90. The awning has a width of about 40 centimetres. The tent is really easy to set up and needs a maximum of 8 pegs. You've got one in each corner, one at the end, and then 2 guy lines that come out from the side of the tent which keep it nice and stable. When you buy this tent, Terra Nova supply these really rather good quality tent pegs. There's nothing wrong with them, but from my perspective, I just like the extra strength that an MSR groundhog provides, so therefore my weight is slightly higher because I use these really solid tent pegs. One of the things I really like about this tent is the fact that you only use 1 peg per corner for both the inner and the fly sheet. They use the same peg. They're connected to the peg by use of paracord, and you can get a really good taut pitch when you peg this tent out. I've known about this tent for many years. A couple of my friends have owned them, and I've often looked at how well they perform. Some of the tents that I've owned before have not really done very well in the UK conditions where you get heavy condensation, heavy rain and wind. In fact, in some of the tents I've owned, I've had a wet tent on the inside where the fly sheet has touched the inner, thus making the inside wet. This tent has an absolutely superb gap between the inner and the fly sheet. It performs really, really well in strong winds, and there are also options to add extra guy lines at both ends should you feel that it's necessary to do so. It really is a great tent in windy and rainy conditions. This tent is a tunnel design tent, and it requires tension to keep it erected. It has a central pole running through a sleeve into grommets on either side of the fly sheet, and then two smaller poles which fit at either end and are placed under tension by the guy line. Being a bloke who's 6'4", I need a tent that's long enough for me, and that's been one of the issues I've had over the years, is finding a tent that's suitably long. With an internal length of 230 centimetres and a huge gap between the inner and the fly sheet, this tent is perfect for me. My sleeping bag never gets wet through condensation in this tent, and because I live in the UK and climatic conditions mean that condensation really will be an issue every evening, I don't worry about it, just have to deal with the condensation that we have. But one thing this tent does have, which helps reduce the condensation, is fantastic venting at either end. There's a flap inside the inner which I can take away, and there's also a flap on the outer, and these are at both ends of the tent, which means I can get a really good airflow through the tent when it's pitched into the wind. It really works very well. The Laser Compact 2, by its very name, means that it's a two-person tent. Good luck to anyone who sleeps in this tent with someone else. It's really quite compact. I guess it can be done in an emergency, but I certainly would not want to go on an extended camping trip with another person sleeping in this tent. To my mind, this is a luxurious one-person tent. I can sleep in it on my sleeping mat, in my sleeping bag, and have my rucksack inside the tent with me, as well as my other equipment. It really is very comfortable. And because it's a two-person tent, allegedly, there is a door on either side. So as you can see, you can open it right up. As for other storage space, the vestibule here provides plenty of space for shoes, stoves, food bags, whatever you want to put out here. There's plenty of room, and there's plenty of room at either end of the tent as well, and I personally put my trekking poles at one end of the tent. There's plenty of room here, and when the weather's bad, there's plenty of room to cook in the vestibule as well. So from a living perspective, the tent does have lots of room to remain comfortable. What I also like about this tent is the fact that the inner door can be zipped right back to enable you to have plenty of space when sat there at your wild camp spot looking at the view. But also, the material on the inner is of such good quality that when you're in that tent and it might be blowing outside, you don't get that breeze hitting you on the inner tent. The fabric is very, very good. I've already mentioned how well this tent performs in wind, and the fact that there are options at either end of the tent to add additional guy lines. But another feature on this tent is that if you wanted to do so, you could buy a second central pole, because this tent has the ability to be double poled in really strong wind. Now, I've got to say, I can't see the point of that, simply because if I'm backpacking, I don't want to have extra weight on my back. And how many times am I really going to be in a situation where the wind is so strong that I need to double pole this tent? However, if this tent is going to be used as an expedition tent and placed in a certain location for quite a length of time, and it is known that there is strong wind, then I can see the advantage of double poling this tent. So I've talked you through the technicals, and I've also talked you through what I particularly like about the tent. In summary, it's a fantastic shelter for the UK climatic conditions where you often get strong wind and very wet weather. It's pretty much a bomb-proof tent with regards to bad weather. But there are drawbacks, and some drawbacks for me personally. I'm 6'4", I'm sat here, you can probably see that my head is already above the tent. It's very difficult for me to sit inside this tent and sit upright. I can't do it. But I've reconciled myself with the fact that I see this as a shelter as opposed to a living space. I have actually spent quite a lot of time in this tent in really bad weather, and it was actually quite comfortable. I was lying on my side for most of it. I can sit up, but my head is up against the inner. But when it's in bad weather, it will do, because I know it's going to keep me dry and safe. Another potential drawback on the tent that might put you off is the fact that there are just no features on the inside. There's one pocket in the corner of the tent which actually doubles up as a place to put the door when you open it right up. So really there's no space in the tent to put those little things such as your keys or your toothbrush, toothpaste, mobile phone, etc. So you've got to be a little bit creative as to where you put your things in the tent when you're in the tent for the night. Another drawback of the tent is that there is no opportunity to put a central line on the inner where you could hang some wet socks up or other clothing. There's not even a loop on the inside of the tent for you to hang a little lamp at night time. It really is a very, very simple design. Another issue which I'm not particularly keen on is when I roll back the fly sheet of the main door. In order to keep it back, thus facilitating access to and from the tent, it's a really fiddly thing to have to do to attach the toggle here to a loop which is on the inner part of the tent. I've overcome that quite simply by adding a clothes peg, and that just does the job just as well. And I've already alluded to one other problem with this tent. With a weight at just under 1.3 kilograms, you can't describe this as an ultralight tent anymore. But I personally am happy to trade that weight, knowing that when I get into it in bad weather and windy conditions, I know I'm going to be safe for the night. So having identified what the minor issues are with this tent, what could Terra Nova do to improve things? Well, they could easily put a couple of extra pockets on the inner, which would make it much easier for the camper to organise their things at night time. They could easily put a loop at the top of the inner tent so that somebody could hang their lamp there. I don't think they need to do anything about the height. The problem is me. I'm 6'4". Terra Nova have provided me with a tent that's long enough and comfortably long enough for me to sleep in this tent and remain dry. But it may well be that if you're 6'4" like me, you won't want to buy this tent because you may want to have that extra living space in your tent. This is a shelter, not a tent for living in for a long period of time. Terra Nova could easily put magnets on the doors and therefore make it much easier to enable the door to be held back. It really is a very fiddly process trying to attach the hook on the fly to the loop on the inner. I've identified some of the really minor issues with this tent, but I just want to summarise why I think this is a really good tent. I've spent 81 nights in it now, and it's barely showing any signs of wear and tear. The ground sheet is in perfect condition, and I've never had to use a footprint with this tent. I just don't think it's necessary. The fly sheet still beads the water really, really well when it rains. The stitching on this tent, it's outstanding. It's so good. The quality is amazing. I absolutely love the gap between the fly sheet and the inner. That gap is so big that there is no danger of the inner ever getting wet when in poor conditions. The space inside the tent for one person is amazing. There is so much room, but I caution against suggesting this is a two-person tent unless it's an emergency. The space at either end of the tent between the inner and the outer for storage is excellent, and the awning provides all the room that you need in this tent to remain relatively comfortable when camping. So in summary, I'd say this is a fantastic tent. Now, what's it cost? The recommended retail price for this tent is £600, but there are always deals to be found on the internet. And even Terra Nova on their website are currently selling this tent in March 2025 at £440. I think it must be last year's tent. But there are other deals to be found on the internet as well, and you can get this tent for as little as £350, so you'll never have to pay the full £600 for this tent. I think It's a great tent for UK conditions. I think it's great for autumn, early spring, and even some winter camping when it's not too cold. I think this tent is excellent, and I will continue to use it for many, many years indeed. If you've enjoyed this review, please write your comments. Please let me know, and I'd love to hear if you own this tent and what you think of it as well. As with ever with all my videos, thanks for watching.